It is a bit of a sticky wicket that Liz Truss finds herself on here, isn't it? So the project that she wanted was to grow the economy and to create high-paid jobs in the private sector. Now, that was the economic project she sold to the Conservative Party to get herself into Downing Street. And clearly, large parts of that project are starting to crumble already. What she can point to as the Great White Hope here is her project on the 31st of October, the new mini budget. Whether that goes ahead on exactly that date, given we now have a new chancellor, remains to be seen. But nonetheless, she could point to that as a way to get the economy moving and to create a high-wage economy. When it comes to the public sector, you are completely right. There is a huge amount of pressure on the public finances. Everything that the government buys is now 10% more expensive, just as it is for you and me. Wages are under pressure. There are strikes being threatened across the public sector. We know that wages across the public sector are unlikely to rise in line with inflation. Where are these cuts going to come from? That is the big question, because there are no obvious places where you could point to in the public sector and say, fantastic, there are billions of pounds of savings to be there. There's a lot of fat on the bones.
Well, do you know what kind of struck me as I was watching her there? It's clear that there wasn't a preemption or a premonition of what the economic touch that she had would do to the markets and how they would react over the last couple of weeks since the mini budget. When she was standing there, it did strike me in terms of political communication terms that there was no kind of political touch there of what's going to make people throw their sofa cushions at the telly as they're listening to you. And a quote which says, "I want to be honest, this is difficult," is just going to make people throw up their hands, because they want leadership and they want some sort of acknowledgement of understanding of what went wrong, how it went wrong, and how this is a remedy to that. And we didn't get much contrition, did we?
No, we got an acknowledgement there from Liz Truss that the tax cuts have gone further and faster than the market was happy with. So a bit of a recognition there of where the problem came from. But of course, one of the major concerns the markets had was a sense of chaos and instability. And what creates instability? Well, U-turns create instability. So Liz Truss will have much more to do to convince the markets that she has her government back on a straight line. I expect all eyes will now turn to what we're expecting to see in the government's medium-term fiscal statement at the end of the month.
Well, do you know, it's funny, because I'm here in Cheltenham and the studios in London. We were messaging back and forward about how we were going to take the feed and all the rest of it. And the editor in London was saying, we're going to take all of the questions. And I said, you know, as long as she's not taking 300, but in her position, she's going to take 4 and then scuttle off. And 4 it was, because it's enough to look like you're not frightened, but not so far that you don't get out of there as quickly as you can. Do you think she'll have been surprised that the first 3 from the Telegraph, the Sun and the BBC all asked her why or when or why wasn't she resigning? And the 4th one, Robert Peston from ITV's, was, will you apologise to your own party for entirely trashing their complete brand for economic competence?
Well, this is the big problem that Liz Truss faces, and it is the problem that a lot of MPs have been talking about. She and Kwasi Kwarteng were completely in lockstep. This is not Kwarteng's economic policy. This is Truss's economic policy that he was carrying out, and they made a big deal of the fact that they were so closely intertwined ideologically, and they wouldn't be like other chancellors and prime ministers having fights among themselves. No, they were one team. So the removal of Kwarteng the man doesn't change the situation. The removal of some of the policies does, but the judgment of Liz Truss is still very much being doubted by Tory MPs.
Well, do you know what's interesting? Again, some of the criticism that we had from the mini budget and from the kind of the government's defence of it was, but don't you understand? It doesn't matter that it's uncosted because we'll just grow the pie, as if nobody else has ever thought of economic growth. And there was a line in her conference, her brief press conference statement there, where she said, you know, we're going to move to more efficient public services. And I was just thinking, yeah, because nobody's ever thought of that either. You know, if you're going to make statements like that, if you want a positive market reaction, you actually have to show the dots that join that make it happen, and there doesn't appear to be any advanced or detailed thinking for the government of the how you do something rather than, you know, just what it is that they're trying to achieve.
Well, if you're putting that question to Liz Truss, I'd expect she would tell you to wait for the government statement at the end of the month, because there are going to be supply side reforms contained within that statement. Whether that is enough, whether such reforms can be enough, is a very, very different question. And actually, if you look at some of the things you're expecting to see in those supply side reforms, I'm thinking, for example, of changes to planning, changing to business regulation. We know that Truss has not been able to agree with her own ministers on what all of those matters will be. We know that she's received pushback from her party on some of the other ones. So whatever the project is that we see put in place at that time, it will be a lesser one than the one that Truss wanted. And even then, the one that Truss wanted, many were saying probably wouldn't achieve the goal that she was aiming to achieve.